Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Simon Sullivan, and I'm the chair of this committee. My first duty is to remind all members that this meeting is being live streamed on the internet for live and subsequent broadcast. So please, can we keep this in mind when speaking? The press and public can record, take photos if they wish to. So the next item on our agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies? Apologies for Councillor Iro and Councillor Knowles. I think I've had a message. Oh, Councillor Knowles. Councillor Knowles. No further apologies. We'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is declaration of interest. Can all members declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests as listed on the agenda now or before any relevant item is? Can't see anyone indicating. So we'll move on to the next item, which is action notes. Can members agree the action notes of the last meeting? Please advise if there are any points of correction. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is employment and skills inquiry evidence gathering. So our main item today is to begin our inquiry on employment and skills, specifically meeting the needs of current and future employment opportunities in the city. Just a reminder to our guests today and members, the key question we are asking, as outlined in section 1 of the cover of document on page 15 of the agenda pack, is how is the council responding to the breaking down the barriers report, and what is the vision for lifelong learning and skills across the city? Also, as listed on the document, are some of the key questions we are seeking further information on. I'd like to welcome all attendees today from GBS LEP, Chamber of Commerce, and the Princess Trust. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today. Can I ask you to introduce yourselves for the benefit of the committee and those watching online? So in the order of the agenda, I'll ask Spencer to start off. Moving on to, okay, we've got apologies from everybody, but we're moving on to Abdul, then after that, so there's indicative timings on the agenda, so I'll ask the speakers to try and keep to about 15 to 20 minutes of sharing the details with some of the times for questions, which I'll take after each speaker. Following the contributions, my aim is for the committee to take some time to add any thoughts and reflections on the input, and then I'll round up the discussion and outline the next steps. Thank you, and over to you, Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Spencer Wilson. I'm Director of Skills Employment from the Greater Birmingham Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership. I've prepared some slides, and also I've put an additional paper in the document pack, which members should have access to. Is it okay to quickly go through these slides that I've prepared, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that come from members? I'll take that as a yes. Just quickly running through these, what I've done is, could I have the next slide, please?
Sorry, Spencer, you kind of cut off there for a bit. So if you
sorry.
Yeah.
So which bit did you hear? I mean, if it's okay, I'll just run through the slides I've prepared for this meeting first. So if we could just move to the first slide. I'll quickly.
That's fine. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you very much. So this, as I say, there's an additional paper in the document pack which gives a bit more detail on some of the interventions GBS LEP has been involved in with regard to young people. But what I'm going to quickly do is I'll quickly go through the strategic focus of the LEP, then the activity the GBS LEP's been involved in and how LEP integration's affecting this, what work we've done in the past with BCC, which is pretty extensive, how we work in the context of joined up thinking and working, and how that can benefit young people going forwards, and then how we can make the most of the strategic opportunities we're presented with going forward. So if I could have the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of our strategic focus, GBS LEP essentially had a skills strategy a couple of years ago, which was business focused and business demand led in everything we do, because that's how the LEP works. But also we had a particular focus around addressing high skills levels within the city. So basically we were lagging behind the national average at level 3 and higher. And so we developed a plan called Plan 10,000 Plus, which, sorry, I think we've skipped one slide too many. Thanks. And so we focused on this Plan 10,000 Plus, which was to increase the high level skills of the residents of the cities and obviously the Solihull area as well. We also have a strategic sector focus, which was based on the priority sectors within the local industrial strategy, which I can run through if that's relevant. COVID then hit, and this affected things and gave us more flexibility in terms of the level of skills we were providing, and we broadened our range beyond the priority sectors to what was needed at the time. And within the COVID experience, we obviously had realised that young people were disproportionately affected by COVID and its impact. And so based on that, we developed a young person strategy called Youth Matter, which kind of aligned itself with breaking down barriers as well, looking at the skills needs, the employment needs of young people, how this was affected through COVID, and also other impacts such as mental health impacts as well. We've also been focusing on the labour market disconnect that we're currently experiencing, this situation we have of high unemployment, but also sort of high availability in terms of young people and high levels of job vacancies that we're currently addressing. So we're working not just with young people, but also with employers as well, to see how they can address this kind of this triple whammy of Brexit, of COVID, and now the current economic crisis we're experiencing as well. And within the LEP, because it's in the nature of a LEP, is to work in partnership. We look to join up and add maximum value across all our interventions. So whether this is strategic intervention or partnership working, we look to tie things up and create those progression pathways for young people going forward. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So in terms of LEP activity, and as I say, there's an additional paper in the pack, which gives a bit more detail on all of these interventions. And with a focus on young people, one of our big priorities is apprenticeships and work-based learning. And we deliver most of this activity through our skills service, within which there is a skills and apprenticeship hub, which is totally business-led. So what we do is we engage businesses, we carry out training needs analyses with them, we develop delivery plans, we work with partners to deliver interventions, and in that sort of address their business needs, look to increase productivity, but also increase sort of employment and career prospects through that as well. Other interventions we fund and support are things like the Ladder for Greater Birmingham, which helps with that, the publicity and the promotion around apprenticeships, not just for businesses, but also for young people. Generation 22, which is the volunteer programme of the Commonwealth Games, which we help to fund as well, and then look for the progression route for all the young people engaged through that. The careers hubs, so we fund with the Careers and Enterprise Company, Birmingham Education Partnership, in terms of developing those pathways into careers and helping with the business engagement side of that as well. And we've also commissioned a young people place study, which shows how sort of has investigated how young people can exhibit pride in the place, where they live, where they work, where they learn as well. And then there were very, very specific projects that we've also funded as well around priority sectors, but also around entrepreneurship, how to engage with those most disaffected young people as well and get them into real career opportunities in growth sectors such as the Ideate project, which works within professional services, but also works with SEND learners as well to show how they can have particular skills which can take advantage of those opportunities. And we've actually brought a lot of these providers together, and BCC is heavily involved in this as well, to see how we can work together to develop a coordinated approach to provision going forwards. Just one last point on that slide. Obviously, we're going through LEP integration at the moment, which members will be aware of, and we're working with the Combined Authority and BCC to see how this provision can continue beyond the LEP's lifetime. So GBS LEP still has funding for for 2023, but we're looking to see how that transition can occur. So kind of the LEP's legacy continues through our partner organisations, and hopefully I'll be working with BCC to help that happen. Could I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So particularly working with BCC, the Skills Service, the Skills and Apprenticeship Hub, we work specifically with BCC in terms of referrals to things like the Supplier Skills Programme, so we can provide a complete and complementary offer to a business, but also that provides career and employment prospects. We work and have developed with BCC the Apprenticeship Levy Transfer Scheme, which ensures that apprenticeship levy funds that BCC provides, which are significant, obviously, because of the massive workforce of the council, are not underspent, not unspent, and are retained within the city and the wider region. We work closely on partnerships with People in Place, where the LEP has developed the business network and engagement side of things, but also has developed a reverse mentoring scheme for young people, so businesses can actually find out what young people really need and really want. We've worked closely on the youth hubs, especially around the integrating the ladder, which I mentioned on the previous slide, into that provision around the library, but also funding the Dolphin Centre hub as well. We're working currently on the careers provision post-LEP, so we're working with the CA and BCC on that to see how that model can work. I'll mention the City Centre Enterprise Zone on the next slide in a bit more detail as well. We're working on UKSPF because obviously BCC are providing the lead on that, and we're looking to engage in terms of what the skills routes can be in terms of this business support priority, but then obviously the people theme going forwards. And we've worked on specific other projects like housing retrofit and green construction skills, and see how we can look to create a workforce that not only addresses that issue of emissions within current housing stock, but also then provides the skills base, which is then an asset to the city, which can then be used broader than our own particular housing stock. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just very, very quickly, in terms of joined up thinking and working, this is the way we work because LEPs are partnership organisations, obviously. But particular partners that we're working with at the moment, and this is both BCC and the LEP, obviously we have to work with the CA in terms of taking things forward through LEP integration, but obviously through future priorities. And we work very, very closely with our skills providers, and independent training providers are particularly important to the LEP, where they provide a disproportionate amount of apprenticeship provision, but also in priority sectors as well. And we work closely, and we need to work closely with the third sector as well, especially when looking at this target group and addressing particular needs of young people. The LEP's obviously led by business needs. We work with key sectors, as I've mentioned, that firstly came through the local industrial strategy, but now obviously Plan for Growth is taking that forward as well. And the importance of anchor institutions, including BCC, obviously, is very, very important in the city. And the last part here is something just being external to the BCC process, but heavily engaged, is the coordination and the joined up thinking between directorates. And obviously, as the LEP activity will be integrated to a certain extent within BCC, this will go across different directorates as well. And it's how to integrate those and add value to each other to create the best possible opportunities out of the resources we currently have for young people, which I'll touch on that on the next slide as well, which I think might be the last one. So if I could have the final slide, please. Thank you. Making the most of strategic opportunities. This is how, and something I've been working on and trying to advance, and possibly struggled a little bit with it. It's how to, in difficult times, make the most of the opportunities we have, which are significant. So looking at those first four I've mentioned, if I just concentrate on the enterprise zone in the city centre, which obviously is a massive investment that GBS LEP has led on in terms of the administration and the management, but also in terms of some delivery aspects. And there are discussions underway, obviously, about the transition to BCC with regard to that. But on the skills side, what we've done is we've commissioned research to see what the skills needs within the enterprise zone business and sectors are. We've then looked to develop a strategic context for interventions, and then develop with partners a portfolio of projects, many of which focus on young people, which can then look to address the employment needs of investors coming into the city, but ensure that their employment needs are met locally. So if we do this, we can say to investors who might be looking at various locations to invest, come to Birmingham because we have the resource here, we have the labour base, the labour market for you to access. So we have the workforce that you need, and then their investment is then retained by local people, local young people in the local economy, reinvested and becomes circular in terms of that. And so we maximise the impact of that. Likewise, the Commonwealth Games, as I said, we worked on the Generation 22 scheme in terms of developing that volunteer base. It's how then to ensure that base, that group of young people that we've actually identified and engaged is then taken forward in these other investments and these other opportunities. How does Birmingham 22 and the legacy, especially around business and investment, link into the enterprise zone? How can we coordinate those two to ensure that people who now are aware internationally of Birmingham because they've seen the games understand the opportunities that exist within the city centre for relocation and the likes, which then links into the plan we mentioned before. And the final point I mentioned there, just to wrap things up, because I appreciate time's tight, is around future jobs. Obviously we're looking at priority sectors and clusters, which the LEP identifies, and we're doing other interventions like the Institute of Technology we funded as well, which looks at sort of advanced manufacturing and future jobs there. And what we have noticed in terms of engaging with businesses, and this is borne out through projects like the Ideator and the Digital Innovator Scheme that we work on, is that there is kind of a generic level across many employers of skills they want to see in young people, whether it's digital skills or it's analytical skills. In terms of the specifics, they can provide those. But in terms of those kind of that core skills base, they want to see that within young people. And so we've been working heavily with large employers, especially, to ensure that that skills base is there. Net zero, which I've mentioned before, and obviously is a priority going forward as well. Enterprise and entrepreneurship, we've obviously within the young people's base, there is this tendency to want to start your own business, especially at the moment. And so we're looking to, through various projects, to provide those opportunities to all young people as well. And finally, this has to be borne out with a robust career support system and various pathways that are then developed. And that's what we've been trying to do. And to be honest, I think fallen slightly short on. So that's something to obviously work at in the future. So I think that just about wraps it up. I think there's one last slide, but it's just a nice graphic. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions members might have. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's always good when we have the LEP here. I've got a few questions. It's all good what we've heard from you. I want to know about what outreach you do. You said you're partnerships, you work with other organisations. I'm interested, like, how does a young disenfranchised person, for example, where I represent in Franklin, find themselves or work their way up to the LEP? Is it mostly just signposting, or do you actually do any outreach in kind of private communities? The second area of questions I've got is around locations. You've mentioned East Birmingham, City Centre Enterprise Zone, Birmingham 2022, which is mostly Perry Bar. Are you doing anything in South Birmingham? Where I represent, frankly, is one of the most deprived areas of the city, especially when it comes to youth unemployment. And residents do often feel like they get forgotten about. A lot of these initiatives happening elsewhere in the city. We are a big city, but it's very easy to forget the self of Birmingham. So I'd be really interested to know what you're doing there. And finally, enterprise and entrepreneurship is something that I think is really, really important. And you've only touched upon it at the end of the presentation, and quite rightly pointed out, young people do want to start up their own businesses these days. You know, it's the 21st century. We're not in Victorian Britain. People should be able to go and set up their business, a business, if that's what they want to do. I'd be interested to know what kind of support you're offering to young people around that, and what we're doing, engaging in partners and third parties to encourage more young people to set up their own businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Spencer, would you like to answer those questions?
No, thank you, Councillor. And in terms of outreach, yes, we tend to be kind of referrals. So we tend to engage directly with the businesses and then work with partners such as BCC or FE providers or the ladder or ITPs, independent training providers, for them to do the engagement. We have touched on some of the individual engagement side of things through our Jobs Fund project, but our Jobs Fund project we've wrapped up, which the paper actually that the paper that's come in the document pack will give a bit of information on. We've pulled that because of the engagement side of things wasn't something that went particularly well, and we didn't really hit the numbers that we should have. So we tend to work with organisations at a better place, and we concentrate on the business engagement side of things as well. That's true as well with the careers provision, where Birmingham Education Partnership obviously leads on the individual side of things, and then we support them with the business engagement side, us and the Careers and Enterprise company. In terms of location, yes, we do work in the south of the city as well. We work with Southern City College especially as well, and Mike Hopkins there, and we support him and various initiatives around that. Enterprise and entrepreneurship, I agree that I think this has been something that we have overlooked. We tend to look at small businesses through the Growth Hub activity, but kind of forget the startup phase to a certain extent. We have looked to address that recently through projects we've supported. I mentioned the Digital Innovators project, the Ideator project. We also supported a project led by an organisation called Enterprise Made Simple, which was specifically looking at business startups as well. But I agree that that is an area that, especially at the moment, needs more focus and more investment if that's available.
Thank you, Spencer. Just before, I think, Councillor Tennant, do you have a question?
Yeah, so just a quick one. So you've mentioned FE and HE. A lot of decisions people make about their future careers start pre-16. Do you do any work with schools and kind of that pre-GCSE careers advice?
Yeah, so that would go through the Careers Hub activity. So we work with 120 odd schools across the city through the Birmingham Education Partnership. And so we look, and again, this is an area that I think can be done better. We look to work with the schools to create those specific employment pathways for young people and ensure that they're aware of different opportunities within the city. But again, I think in terms of joining things up, rather than just having kind of generic sector-focused activity, I think as we have specific opportunities and specific investment opportunities, we should be looking to tie those up more closely. We also have looked at the Partnership for People in Place initiative in East Birmingham. So we're looking at, or we are delivering the reverse mentoring scheme, which is it's obviously a BCC programme, but we're delivering the reverse mentoring scheme, which for the first time probably gives young people a chance to actually tell employers what they want, and employers actually then have to understand and flip it around what the needs of young people are and how they can look to address that going forward. I think this is when we're in these situations, we always tend to say, well, what's the problem with young people? What can we do? What are they doing wrong? How can we make it different for them? I think we also need to talk to employers more in terms of opportunities that are created and how they sort of coming out of coming through Brexit, then going into the pandemic, and then the current economic crisis, and that labour market disconnect. A lot of the issues that are being faced by young people were there before. They're just exacerbated now. It's a case of how we can ensure that employers identify those and address those through provision at the moment.
Councillor.
Thank you. Just on the back of what's been said, I want to touch on apprenticeships. Some information I've got here in front of me. Data reported to this committee in November showed that Birmingham is lagging behind in the take-up of apprenticeships. 3.7% of 16 to 17-year-olds start an apprenticeship compared to 4.7% nationally and 11% in the top performing areas. So with your expertise, what feedback do you have from employers that might explain why this is happening? And also on the back of that, what would you say, how could organisations working with young people make sure that young people from the most disadvantaged and deprived communities are getting the support that they need?
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of apprenticeships, yes, the city has always lagged behind. And specific initiatives like the Ladder for Greater Birmingham specifically looks at these issues and looks to publicise and promote. We need to promote with specific communities in apprenticeships as a viable and a worthy and a comparable route into a proper career, not the kind of the old-fashioned view of apprenticeships and things like degree apprenticeships, and the promotion of them will help with that. In certain communities, apprenticeships obviously don't have the kudos of going to university and the like, so we need to promote that. We do have specific funds to address BAME communities and addressing apprenticeship take-up within BAME communities. There are issues at the moment specifically, and this is across the region, but obviously in the city, around the take-up of apprenticeships with young people. Specifically, young people numbers are down, and also within small businesses as well. So the importance of small businesses, although we tend to look at the larger ones and the sort of high-profile employers to take apprentices on, but small businesses as well, and the importance of apprentices to them and what they can offer at the current time is really, really important. So that's what we try and do through our hub. Is actually, and it's more difficult now because small businesses especially have to a certain extent bigger fish to fry, and things are very, very difficult. And if you think about paying the bills and the wages and surviving, possibly thinking about taking an apprentice on is not top of your list. But if we can address it in terms of, well, actually, this is what the value would be of taking an apprentice on, this is how an apprentice can improve productivity, this is how it can improve your skills base, then we tend to overcome those issues. It's just quite a difficult time at the moment. We are looking to address it through that provision. Have I missed anything out? No, I think that's it.
That's it, yes. Thank you. That's answered. I've got a few questions. Just on that, in terms of the uptake of apprenticeships, do you have any data on the uptake of apprenticeships from underrepresented groups?
I haven't got it on me, but I shall forward that to members after this.
Oh, that'd be great. And the other thing that might be useful is ward by ward level. If you had it,
yeah,
on a constituency or ward level, I think that would be quite useful as well. I think members were quite interested in knowing that information. So, one of the things that the committee and this inquiry that we're keen to look at is I think part of your slide was jobs of the future, and the sort of different sectors that we can envisage where the jobs are, and what the sort of barriers currently are that employers are facing when trying to recruit young people with the right skills. I mean, would you be able to sort of shed some light on from your experience, what barriers employers are currently facing in recruitment in Birmingham?
In terms of, I mean, it's not just the barriers that employ in the sort of a more general point. In terms of the kind of the post-pandemic economy and coming out, obviously there are a lot of vacancies that are currently available that are at levels that would have normally been taken by a labour market, by a workforce that isn't currently available. So obviously the impact of Brexit, the supply of labour has changed in terms of that. We also have a situation where young people can actually choose to a certain extent between jobs. They don't have to look at certain sectors. So if you look at hospitality, a lot of the issues that hospitality has were already there in terms of not great working conditions, not great wages, not great hours. And young people can now choose to a certain extent if they would like to go into retail instead, which pays better wages, better hours, better conditions. So there's those kind of issues as well. In terms of a skills base, there are certain, as I say, certain generic skills that employers want, especially in sort of professional services, business, finance, that side of things, but also in things like creative and cultural, digital skills, which are kind of those analytical skills, those digital skills. What you find that BNP say to us is we can teach them all the financial stuff. That's fine. We do that. We know how to do that better. It's that kind of general analytical thinking, that mindset that we want to see in people coming through. That can be from a graduate, or it can be from somebody who's coming straight out of school, possibly even somebody who has special educational needs. It doesn't matter to them. And that's what projects like the Ideator and the Digital Innovators project does. It takes those young people who normally would kind of be difficult coming out of school, or in that position or in college, and actually gives them that base of analytical skills, which they are actually attuned to in many ways, and then passes them on to an employer, and they then to give them the employment specific skills, the job specific skills they need. So it's kind of creating these new ways of approaching problems, these new ways of thinking about skills provision going forward, rather than just saying there's as it used to be, an NVQ2 in bricklaying or what have you, and saying that's it, that's your job. It's giving them that base of skills that can then be adapted to specific opportunities that employers actually want.
Thank you, Spencer. Councillor Ruki.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question in regards to the apprenticeships I mentioned earlier. You mentioned that in schools that you are trying to focus. I was just wondering how you can show young people that apprenticeship is a viable option, because I believe for a lot of young people, the degree route is not the right route. And in schools, I think it's not encouraged as much as it should be in terms of apprenticeships. So how can we show them that just leaving school and going on to apprenticeship is the right way, and it's not, as some people, as it's perceived as being failing if you leave school early and go into apprenticeship or go into the business route? So how are we trying to change the mindset from the young age to school level onto college and further education?
No, thank you. It's through that, in terms of what we're specifically doing, is through that coordination with the Education Partnership and the Careers Office, into the Ladder for Greater Birmingham provision and the publicity that's provided there. And then it's the engagement of employers within that process to actually say, well, these are the opportunities that are presented. This is what an apprenticeship can lead to. This is where you can go. This is how this actually gives you a better advantage over other people and other opportunities. I noticed one of the priorities here was sort of publicity and marketing. It's how to actually get that, how to get into the schools. It's also how to, within certain communities, work with families as well, and potentially and actually say, well, yes, you've got this opinion of an apprenticeship, but it's not like that. The other thing we used to do, or we do with businesses, is don't call them apprenticeships. Actually, it's a development program in terms of within the business. It doesn't, if that's a stigma, don't worry about it. This is what it is. This is how it suits you. This is how you can adapt it to upskill your workforce and meet your sort of productivity requirements. So it's that comms piece. It's working with employers. It's working with young people. It's working with school. It's working with businesses. It's providing that full package, which actually then creates the package of skills and employment and provision that actually isn't related to a sort of an old-fashioned idea of apprenticeships.
Thank you, Spencer. Does any other members like to ask questions? Spencer, I have one. Obviously, in terms of like our inquiry and what sort of recommendations that we will be looking to make, I would just like to get some feedback from you in terms of with your experience. What do you think are the key elements that would need to be considered when designing a scheme of employment support for young people and businesses? And also, if you could suggest 3 recommendations that you'd like to see this scrutiny committee and the report that we're working on to improve the skills and employment of young people, what would they be?
I think I was kind of had this in mind when I put that presentation together, and it is, it's giving a bit of background, but it's also in terms of the LEP integration piece and where the LEP currently is. It's kind of it's trying to sort of look forward and see what we need to do. So in terms of a scheme of employment support, it has to be attractive to the young person. And I think we've just discussed that with Councillor in terms of these are the career opportunities. This is how it can benefit you. This is how it benefits the community. This is how it ties in with your life at the moment, your lifestyle. I think it has to benefit the business. And that's the flip side that we've always been trying to address through the Skills Hub, through the Skills Service. It's what does this bring to your business? How does this improve productivity? How can we make that direct correlation, which is something we always have to do through our intervention. And I think my big sort of point to stress here is that joined up approach, which I actually find sort of quite frustrating. It is really, really rough at the moment, economically and socially. It's a difficult environment, but there are real opportunities. And every one of those opportunities, whether that's an HS2 or it's an enterprise zone in our case, which is obviously something we've been heavily involved in, every one of those investments and interventions needs to be maximised. So if you're talking across the local authority or if you're talking across a partnership, everyone has to work together. Everyone has to do their bit and add value. So you can see, well, if this investment comes in here for that business there to create that premises there, it then has a knock-on effect which ensures that these skills are required by local people here, that those local people then have to access those opportunities, that they're then given the support to do that. And that, I think we just need to maximise that. And that's what we're trying to do through the enterprise zone and to that skills sort of development piece within it, which runs alongside to the capital investment.
Thank you, Spencer. Do any members have any further questions that they'd like to ask? One final question before we say goodbye to you, Spencer, for today, is can you please share the link to the evidence gathering survey on Be Heard to your contacts in Birmingham?
Yes, of course.
Quite useful.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
Thank you. That's been really useful. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your contributions answering the questions today. And if you have any further information that you think might be beneficial to the inquiry, please do forward that to this email, Fiona, and we'll circulate. Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our next speaker, who is Abdul, who's the head of public sector partnerships. I'm going to read up I've lost my where I was on the agenda. So Abdul, over to you. I think you could miss the first part. So my name is Councillor Sam Suleiman. I'm the chair of the committee. So welcome to the committee. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So you see, we're just going to get a presentation.
I think in terms of the first, what Spencer was saying, I thought that was quite useful in terms of looking at what are our recommendations or how we make any sort of employment scheme attractive and really have clear messaging on how it's going to benefit both young people and employers by getting that marketing almost get that right. So that was quite useful.
So I've come over from South Leicestershire this morning, so as trains are a little bit funny at the minute, and I needed to get the children to school before I came, so apologies for my late arrival this morning. But my role is head of partnerships for the Princeton Trust. I cover Central West, which is Birmingham and the West Midlands, and thanks for inviting us in for this conversation today. So essentially what we do is our young person offer ranges from supporting young people really early, from the age of 11 all the way up to the age of 30. And what we do is we run confidence building programs, personal development, social development programs. And what we also do is we provide programs within education. And those programs range from supporting those who are at risk of falling out of education. So that's the target demographic within schools. But the confidence building programs that are outside of the school environment, they're things like going on residentials, doing community-based projects, building confidence, building self-esteem, supporting with things like mental health difficulties. But essentially what we're trying to do is get young people in a position where they can think about sustainable outcomes. And that will involve things like employability. But we have partners such as Marks and Spencer's that we work quite closely with, who offer a number of placements within their retail stores each year for young people that we're supporting. And ultimately what we're trying to do is get young people to outcomes in employability and into sustainable routes. So that can involve volunteering, it can involve employability. So that's essentially our young person offer. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to do is just bring a bit of light to our enterprise support. So here what we do is we support young people to start up a business through a range of different workshops and interventions, one-to-one mentoring. In Birmingham in the last 12 months, we support 216 young people and around one business startup per month. And essentially the list that you can see on the screen now, there's been a variety of businesses that have started up, but it's around entrepreneurial skills, getting young people to think about what they can alternatively do. The funding that supports this is currently European, and that comes to an end next June. So that's obviously quite a significant risk for us in terms of the funding that we've got in place for this programme. And what we're trying to do is replace the funding currently through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So that's something that we are trying to position ourselves and ensure that we can continue to support young people. But what really happens here is quite a dedicated intervention, workshops, thinking about things like tax returns, thinking about the business skills that you need in order to get into that industry. But what we're also seeing is that young people want business startup as a secondary income. So some of our young people might have already gone into employment but need secondary income, and this is where the entrepreneurial skills come in. And essentially, with the cost of living crisis and things that are becoming more expensive, if you have your own business on the side, it can help with sort of supporting you as an individual and increasing your ability to have that surplus income, and that disposable income, to allow you to sort of progress as an individual. So, you can see that enterprise support is quite important. We'll move on to the next slide. So I have shared the Youth Index, and the Youth Index is a survey that we complete every year. It speaks to thousands of young people across the UK, and it is quite stark in terms of the information that we are receiving. Happiness is at the lowest point that it has been in 13-year history. So young people are particularly unhappy. Almost a quarter of the young people that we've spoken to are still struggling with the emotional impact of the pandemic and returning to society. Nearly half of the young people that we spoke to are saying that they're burnt out, and 35% said that they've never felt more alone. So young people have really significantly been impacted by the pandemic, and they're still not quite recovered in terms of their emotional and mental health impact. And what you will see is services like CAMS and social services who are dealing with young people with mental health, they're inundated with a number of young people that they're having to support. So the programs that we provide are essentially another mechanism of helping young people address some of the challenges that they're coming across. But this survey is available annually. We normally complete it sort of February, March time. And what we will do is we will continue to sort of produce a youth index, and that survey can be readily made available for yourselves if you want that data. But it is in the papers I think the Basima put out. So just a couple of snippets from that index there. The next slide, please. So this graphic is not as clear on the screen, but what you can see is that the youth unemployment rate in the UK sits at about 9%. But what we've got in West Midlands, which is the second bar, is the highest rate of youth unemployment in the whole of the UK, which sits at just under 15%. So I think it's coming in at 14.9%. So, we know we've got a challenge in this particular area. We know that Birmingham in the West Midlands is the highest rate of unemployment in the UK. This has come off a website called Statista. So it's information that's available for anyone to access. But you can see that in this area in particular, we have the highest rate of youth unemployment. So what are we trying to do at the Prince's Trust? If we just move on to the next slide. We're trying to build a case for the particular needs that we've got in Birmingham. And what we want to do is ensure that we as an organisation have a focus on particular pockets of deprivation, particular pockets of youth unemployment, but also ensure that we are targeting key demographics and being quite diverse and inclusive in our approach. We're a national charity, and what we're trying to ensure is that our resources are embedded where we feel that the greatest need is prevalent. So this, let's just move on to the next slide for us, please, Basira. What we're looking at is 30 key indicators across 30 local authorities in central England, and we're looking at things like indices of multiple deprivation in order to target our work effectively. And then we're trying to sort of look at key highlights and trends to ensure that our work is focused. If we move on to the next slide. Some of the indices that we're looking at are things like child poverty, free school meals, diversity, job seekers allowance, youth crime, etc. And what we're doing is we're gathering that data across multiple areas, and we're looking at then identifying key geographies that we want to target moving forwards. So just move on to the next slide. What we've done is now identified some focus areas. So you can see that the IMD data suggests that Birmingham obviously is one of the most deprived areas that we need to target. We know that that's not just focused in some areas, it is particular areas of Birmingham that is important, but we've also identified that there is other localities in the West Midlands, Wolverhampton, Walsall, Coventry, Dudley, for example, where there is pockets of deprivation. Some of them areas may not fall within the top 20%, but they've got pockets of deprivation that do significantly stand out and do need considerable attention in terms of target for young people. So if we go to the next slide for us. This graphic sort of shows the youth population. So you can see Birmingham is above the average, which is just on that slide there. But what we've also got is, I'll get my screen, it's a bit easy to see. What we've also got there is, other places that are coming high in terms of youth population in the West Midlands as well. So places like Coventry are significantly high. And then diversity, you can see that Birmingham has got a high amount of young people from a BME background. I think you can also see that it's significantly higher than a lot of the other areas across the UK. So you will, by delivering services in Birmingham, ensure that you're having quite a diverse pool of young people accessing provision as well. So, we can see that quite clearly. And then if you move on to the next slide for us, Seema. Now, this is quite interesting. Child poverty, if you look at Birmingham, is significantly high. but we do know that there's quite a large population of young people residing within Birmingham, but it's significantly higher than a lot of the other areas, as you can see. And then we've also looked at education achievement. Again, Birmingham, this is the percentage of qualifications, the number of people that are qualified within that particular area. So again, you can see Birmingham is significantly higher for percentage of no qualifications. Now this ranges from 16 to 64, so we are trying to pin that data down more narrowly to young people. So this is quite a larger pool of people, but we are interested to see if we can pin that down to a lower age group as well. So that's quite interesting in terms of that slide. And then move on to the next one. Now this was quite interesting. So the number of NEETs, so these are young people who are not in education, employment or training. So Birmingham is actually just on the average line, but this is specifically 16 to 17-year-olds. These are young people that come in potentially out of education, not entering into school, not entering into college or university. But that percentage line is quite low, and I just wonder whether or not we are capturing the data effectively, because these data sources are coming from national government websites. But I wonder whether or not we have got another way of just ensuring that that is more representative, because we're not 100% sure if that's correct, where you can see areas like Nottingham that are significantly higher in terms of the need percentages. So, okay, so that was quite an interesting one. But yeah, youth unemployment, you can see that Birmingham is above the average in that particular slide. So next slide. And this is quite an interesting one as well. If you look at youth crime, significantly high for Birmingham. And I think the data was saying children cautioned each year is 497 for Birmingham. So that is significant number of young people that are being cautioned within the area. So we know that working with the Police and Crime Commissioner, for example, is quite a specific target for us, ensuring that we're supporting young people who are at risk of offending and supporting them through our programmes is particularly key. So that graphic obviously shows that there is a particular need in addressing the challenges that we've got within Birmingham around that area. And if you move on to the next one for us, please. Again, Birmingham particularly high on job seekers allowance claimants. So we know we've got a significant challenge with moving these young people closer to the labour market and ensuring that they can access employment opportunities. Employment support allowance isn't quite the same. It's in line with some of the other areas that we've been looking at, but we can see that job seekers allowance still is quite a significant high in terms of the number of claimants. And then the final slide for us. So what we want to use, obviously, is this data to make sure that we're focused as an organisation in the right areas. We're ensuring that our resources are targeted. We're maintaining a picture and a landscape of the needs that sit outside in these particular areas, and just use our data to benchmark referrals, but also ensure that we've got that EDI strategy correct, and ensuring that we're inclusive as an organisation. So hopefully that's been helpful for you in terms of the statistics and the information that you've seen there today. And if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you, Gavin. And I think thank you for all that data. And I think it kind of does really highlight the scale of the sort of problem that we have here in Birmingham, but also this committee's commitment through our report to get something better for the young people in Birmingham. So first of all, I'll open the floor for questions, and I have a few questions that I'll Councillor Moran.
Thank you for coming. Don't just love the Princess Trust. I mean, wasn't that just having the data? I don't know if that's because I'm a geek, but it's just having this sort of information at your fingertips, just in such a great presentation as well. So thank you for that, and also thank you for the work that you do. So I'm really passionate about getting young people into business and entrepreneurship, and I just want to touch on the slide here about youth crime in Birmingham. In your experience, do you find there's a correlation between youth crime counterline drug gangs, kids getting wrapped up in drugs and selling that sort of stuff, and that kind of thirst for entrepreneurship. And as an organisation, how do we tap into that to get kids, rather than going out and selling drugs? Why don't you go become a hairdresser or a barber or do something productive in society so that you're making money in a socially acceptable way? Because, and also on the back of that, another question would be, how much do you think that deprivation leads into that? Because I mean, I can relate to this. When I grew up, I didn't have a lot of money. That's why I got into business, because I just saw that as a pathway out of poverty. And so how do you stop children from getting wrapped up in drugs and that glamorous counterline exploitation, and say, right, no, come over here, you can start a business. I'm sure you probably would be doing this sort of work, but I would, on this inquiry, really like to dive deep into that to figure out what is it that British Trust are doing, and we could probably look elsewhere as a model.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and you've hit on a really significant topic, because what we're trying to do is harness them skills, because obviously them skills around entrepreneurial ventures that they're doing for the wrong reasons within their communities could be used for the right purposes. And what we've got is a lot of role models that have become Princess Trust ambassadors, who have come from that particular background, who can be relatable to the individuals, and we will bring them in as guest speakers, and we will ensure that that experience is shared, that background that you've spoken about. We've got many individuals who have been in that particular scenario. So that's one of the methods that we're trying to ensure that young people can see the advantages of coming out of that particular them challenges, that industry, that drug trade that they might be involved with, harnessing them skills and putting them to use in other industries. Sometimes what can be challenges is that they can know that they can earn X amount by doing X activity in a particular community, and it's trying to demonstrate to them, actually, well, you could do that in a genuine manner through a genuine trade with this particular business adventure, and we can put your skills that you've actually got to use correctly. So it's about, that mentoring, it's that guidance, it's that relatable role models, it's demonstrating that things can happen in a more prevalent way if you just challenge yourself to come out of that particular area. So we're working with local police officers, we're looking with antisocial behaviour officers that are also trying to sort of ensure that young people can move in the right direction. But it's got to be a joined up approach. We can't do it all alone. There's some fantastic sort of grassroots organisations that are out there that are supporting young people within communities who are sometimes as volunteers, giving the time up for free. And it's working with them to sort of direct people into the right method. And diversity definitely plays a challenge within that. And it's just trying to ensure that the police are there to support. They're not there to be there. They're not there to sort of help you. And some of the communities can really put off from that interaction. So what we're trying to do is sort of demonstrate that actually they're there to support. They're going to help you address the challenges, and we're here to then give you the skills to move you to the next step. So yeah, absolutely great question.
Breaking down barriers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abdul. And I'm just wondering, I know we're sort of as a committee thinking about Protocol 16, but I think in terms of what Councillor Moran was saying, I think nowadays you find that these sort of criminal gangs are targeting younger children, vulnerable children. So where you're looking at primary school children who are getting targeted, and I think having that kind of information from an early age, picking up on those skills, I think that children have that vision and that drive at a very early age, and getting them that right information early on would kind of prevent that further down the line. So I think that was a really good question and really, really useful. Do any other members have questions?
I mean, I can come on the back of what you were just saying there actually as well, because we do run an enterprise challenge within schools. So that, that what we're trying to do is get the young people to think about entrepreneurial skills. So we run 3 programs in schools. One is Achieve, one is Enterprise Challenge, and one is Mosaic. Mosaic is particularly targeted at communities from BAME backgrounds, so we're seeking as volunteers from a diverse range of volunteers, who then go into schools and give up their time. An enterprise challenge is essentially thinking about a concept and an idea and a business vision. So, a school a couple of months ago, what they did was they went to a residential home, they asked what they could support with, and it was actually producing fruit and veg for that particular residential home, but then selling it to them as a produce, so then they could put it into their catering and their cooking items instead of purchasing it from a local supermarket. They worked with an allotment site to allow that to happen. So they went to the allotment site, they helped with the growing produce, made sure that produce was then prepared, took it to the residential home, sold it, and it just showed that actually they can put their skills to use. So things like that are really important, because if they're thinking about a business concept and a business idea, and it's happening within schools, so they're developing their skills effectively. So that's the kind of work that we'll do in terms of early intervention and making sure young people are thinking about the right type of career rather than the wrong areas.
Yeah, just to come back on that with the and the breaking down barriers stuff, really, because when people often talk about youth unemployment, it's very high in Birmingham. They often forget that we're a young city, so of course it's going to be bigger than elsewhere. And you did touch on that, which was great. But in terms of breaking down barriers in certain communities, you've already touched on in terms of the youth crime stuff and the kind of what the disconnect they have with authorities such as the police. What would you do in terms of making sure that people from disenfranchised backgrounds, just elaborate on what you do to build up their confidence and self-esteem, so that they're not kind of, when you talk to some of these young people, they kind of have certain attitudes, don't they? They talk like this, and you're not really going to get a job if you go to a job interview and you talk like that. And often they feel like they can't speak formally because they're in a kind of clique, they're in a group partner, it's kind of this group mentality. So how do you break that? And they've been doing this for like 5 years, all through their adolescence, which for a young person is most of their life. So how do you kind of, build that kind of confidence and into someone so that they can go into a civic setting, into a job interview, and perform best to their absolute ability so they can get the job, especially with the BME community, breaking down those kind of barriers, because we do, I do feel that's a big challenge for us as a city.
So what we have is a very relatable workforce. So what our recruitment policy is to try and ensure that we are recruiting young people. So our staff are youth development leads that provide the one-to-one mentoring, the guidance, the information and advice, the coaching, the confidence building. They do range sort of between an age of 25 to sort of 40. So they're not essential. They're not so far from being young themselves. And what that means is what we're looking for is actually individuals who have had challenges themselves that have come through them challenges. So our recruitment mechanism is to ensure that we are recruiting a diverse range of staff, but also relatable role models. And that ensures that when young people do come onto our programs, that mechanism of conversation that they might have isn't so far from our staff and our individuals that are doing the support, because they've not so long ago been there themselves. So that's one of the methods that we do, is in deploy particular recruitment tactics. And there's no reason as to why young people who haven't accessed our program don't come back and work in Prince's Trust as well. So that's ensuring that we are quite diverse with our recruitment policy, but making sure that we've got relatable staff and mentors. We're also training our staff on a regular basis around some of the issues that young people are facing, things like mental health, things like drugs and alcohol, things like antisocial behaviour, just to ensure that that understanding is maintained, that yes, there's going to be challenges, but it's how you work through them challenges that are essentially most important for that young person. So I think that definitely helps, but it's just being relatable and confident and ensuring that you can direct the young people to think about, well, what does the employer want? And an employer will want an individual who's got the skills, the qualifications, but also the ability to put themselves in that environment, but try and develop once they're in that environment. We've had young people who've started with Marks and Spencer's on the shop floor, are now managers. So, if you apply yourself accordingly, and we can bring them examples and show them examples to the individuals, if you apply yourself accordingly, there is an opportunity to progress in that industry. So, yeah, that's our method.
I mean, so I'm shadow accountant children. I have to say to young people, if you look at the average CV, your qualifications, where they sit, right at the bottom. Okay, what's at the top of the CV? What is the employer looking for the most? And that's, are you punctual? What's your character? What's your personality? These sort of confidence. Do you have the confidence? And that's what they will see straight away. Who are you as an individual? How do you sell yourself? If you can't sell yourself first, you're not really going to sell anything. And a lot of employers are willing to take a punt. They'll take a punt. If you show up and you've got that confidence, you've got something authentic about it that's different, even if you're a bit of cheeky chappy, they'll take a punt, And the interesting statistic that was mentioned on this committee is the fact that every business was to hire one young person in the city and solve people. So it's breaking down those sorts of barriers. How do you get businesses to think a little bit different, to take that punt? And that one final question on the back of that is your marketing and outreach. Where do you get most of your clientele, if you want to call it that? So do they get referred to you, or do you have any outreach to get people into the business?
No, we have an outreach team, and what we've started to do over the last 6 months is particularly focus on doing things at weekends and evenings, because we know that actually young people sometimes, when they're in the wrong habits, won't necessarily get out of bed till 12 o'clock, and then potentially aren't thinking about doing anything until the evening and maybe even the weekend. And when they are out in their particular communities, they might be accessing services like youth settings, or they might be on the streets, they might not necessarily be engaged in any particular routine. So what we're trying to do is engage at the times when they're available, but also work with grassroots organisations, and that is key, because there's some really excellent voluntary sector organisations that engage with youth in local settings, and some of them are volunteers, so they don't actually have the time during the 9 to 5 period to come along to a session to understand what the business trust can offer. So what we're trying to do is open the doors to them on a Saturday. We've got the centre in Digleth, which is not too far. We're getting them to come in, we're talking to them about our programmes. They're then engaging with the youth in their local communities and actually referring them to our settings. But drugs and alcohol services, mental health services, all the different range of services that exist out there, we're ensuring that our programmes are being shared with them particular partners, then they can refer the individuals to us. So yeah, we're doing as much as we can, and it has been a slow sort of transition since the pandemic to get young people numbers back up to where they were pre-pandemic. So we were averaging, sort of 15 to 25 young people on a programme. We're now averaging 10 to 15. So things aren't where they were pre-pandemic, but we're still trying to ensure that we're doing as much as we can. Job centres, local job centres, the libraries, and the place where the youth hub is the youth hub at the library. So we're making sure the staff are going along to the library as well to make sure that claimants who are young can access Princess Trust services as well.
Do you work a lot with the council, I think, as well?
Yeah, we work really closely with Tara Beryl. So we are linked into the YI programme, Youth Employment Initiative, which is funded currently through European funding as well. So we're making sure that we're linked in with that.
Okay. Just on that final point, what's the progress with the Shared Prosperity Fund?
So yesterday, all the announcements were made. So I don't know if you've seen them, but I think Birmingham have got about 7 million from what I'd seen in the allocations, and that's for 23-24 for skills provision. So it's then deciding where that skills provision sits, and I think the consortium that's currently established around the Youth Employment Initiative is quite effective. there's partners like Pathways, CGL, Prince's Trust, that sort of sit around that particular consortia. And it's really effective at engaging young people and supporting them through a holistic approach. So, our recommendation would be to try and continue that in the capacity that exists, if that's possible.
Do you know who makes the decisions about it? The combined authority or the local authority?
The Westminster Combined Authority they're the ones who submitted the intervention plan. Kate's probably more qualified than I am.
Yeah, so the combined authority in the sense make a decision for the overall level. We will contribute to what we want that to actually do. So there may be some movement around. I'll need to check that announcement to be made because I think it's been made to early spring. So
I will send you the link.
so if you can send me the link. So we need to work that through because the Shared Prosperity Foundation and Council doesn't quite align with the European Social Fund. So we'll have to do a bit of wiggling around, but we can all be good together and we'll get to the same.
So, and because it's a combined authority, I've already spoke to it's just so to do that. Because he knows our entrepreneurship and he was former chief executive of John Lewis. So yeah, and I can't see an issue with that, to be fair, because the work you do is really, really valuable.
I've done, and just on bringing us back to kind of the impact of the pandemic. I mean, on young people. I mean, some of the statistics that we saw there, they're quite alarming. I mean, in terms of that, how can other organisations in Birmingham sort of best work from, your sort of experience that you have with working with young people through the pandemic to build people's confidence and resilience?
I think the most important thing is for young people is seeing that there's an end game. There's something that they can achieve if they apply themselves. And I think sometimes when they get demoralised is when they put in a number of applications for job opportunities, they don't get responses, they don't get any feedback, they kind of get demoralised, and then that can actually affect their mental health more significantly. But what we're trying to do is prepare them to apply for job opportunities when they're ready. The worst thing that you can do is put someone into that position where they think they're ready, but actually we know that from the skills that they're demonstrating, the qualifications that they've got, the employer isn't necessarily going to give them the opportunity. So the best thing to do with them is, and it can take sometimes 3 to 6 months to get a young person to that point, but is to invest the time and the energy into them to give them the right skills and qualifications that are essentially going to then attract an employer. When an employer feels actually that is the right person for me, then the rejection doesn't happen, because when young people get rejection, that's when they feel demoralised, that's when their mental health becomes prevalent, and that's when they can fall back into some of the issues that they were facing previously. So it's important that we get them to a point where they are ready for employment, they've got the right skills, they've got the right qualifications, then the chances are that the employer will give them a chance. So I think that's really important to make sure that happens.
In terms of our scrutiny report that this committee are doing, I think one of the good things that you mentioned was employing younger people, diverse workforce, people who are relatable. I think that's quite useful for us. But is there any other things that recommendations that you'd like to see the scrutiny report make in terms of improved skills and employment of young people in Birmingham?
I think the recommendation for me is to try and ensure that consortia partnership approach, because that is really effective. Particularly the Youth Employment Initiative that's been led and managed by Birmingham City Council. That has been significantly important, because what it's allowed is young people to access multiple services and address multiple challenges. So I think that for me would be the standout.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Could I just make a point? Just the information you provided around mental health, it was very, very stark and really important. But just to mention to you that there is one of the other inquiries that the committee doing is around children and young people's mental health. So there is a link, and if you're I'm assuming because that's a public document, I mean it's on our website.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd share that with the children and people's
Yeah.
mental health inquiry task and finish group, because there's be information there that can help inform that work as well.
Yeah, and just to correct something that Simon asked, it's the West Midlands Combined Authority allocation of 7, not just Birmingham. So that means that West Midlands Combined Authority around UKSPF will then decide how much goes through to the different localities in that area, and that's the revenue strand that's come through. There's also a capital strand that sits around UKSPF.
And can I just ask a follow-up question just on the funding, just the timescales for that? Because what I've picked up from other information is that there's potentially a gap between the SF funding finishing and that funding being available.
So I think the West Midlands Combined Authority and the local authorities have decided people and skills strand won't come through until 2014. So that's April 2014.
2024.
2014. I'm living 20 years, 10 years ago. 2024 is when that will come in. But the business strand is essentially before that, and that's where potentially the pre-employment skills around entrepreneurs and business enterprise could fit in. And that's at risk in terms of that's coming to an end fairly soon next year.
There are 3 pillars in the shared prosperity plan. I can't remember this business one, which is talked about, and then there's the one which is predominantly the stuff funds using careers. The using careers doesn't kick in until April 24, but the one which is business support kicks in next year, so there will be a bit of a gap. Business support one sits with who kicks in, doesn't sit with me. I lead on that third one, which is careers with someone. So this mine doesn't kick in until April 20.
Yeah, so you've got communities in place, you've got business, and you've got people and skills.
Skills doesn't.
Yeah, people and skills doesn't kick in until April 2024, and the youth employment initiative comes to an end in October of next year. So there is a gap.
There's a gap between October 23 and 24.
Yeah.
See how we
Any further questions? Abdul, no. Abdul, finally, would you be able to share the link for the evidence gathering survey that our committee has with all your contacts, please?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
And if you have any other information that you think that might be useful to our
I'll email Kate the allocations for UKSPF and the decisions that came out yesterday from them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
We don't do business cards.
just
You don't do business cards.
You can have e-business cards is the way to go. You just put the phones together and just do it.
Well, yeah. Drop me an email.
Yeah, no problem.
I haven't got a card myself.
Shall I do an email to connect you?
Yes, do that.
Yeah, perfect. And
Thank you very much, Abdul, and thank you for your contributions and taking the time out from coming all the way from Leicester.
yeah,
Thank you very much. And colleagues, are there any thoughts or reflections at this stage that you want to share before we conclude and outline next steps?
Yeah, well, I missed in the meeting. I missed the chamber of commerce.
There's certain apologies. I think Emily has got COVID.
Okay. We'll see.
Invited to a January session.
So we'll move on to the next steps. So we have got a meeting on the 11th of January, and we've currently got Birmingham Education Partnership attending to give us perspective of work with schools and education setting, and the Children's Trust will be speaking about young people in care and those with special education needs. And then potentially, is that where Emily then will?
I've asked her to.
Yeah, so we haven't had a response. We will try and a small group of members that form the task and finish group also have some meetings scheduled for January, and I think you're working at the moment to get some details of attendees for those meetings. And I just encourage people to keep an eye on the diaries for attendees for these meetings. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the work programme.
Just go back, so this is what you were saying about the next steps. I was just wondering, this year around the UK Prosperity Fund and the ending of the European funding, I know in the report that came to the last committee meeting, there was a reference to that, and it flagged the gap that there may be in the council budget, and there was an application for funding to bridge that gap. I'm just wondering whether, as the chair, you might want to ask for an update, then that can inform the committee's work going forwards, because it does seem quite a significant time period, and if that funding isn't found, I'd imagine people in that service will move to other services or look for other jobs. And it's not, it's not just that filling that gap, it's the potential risk of that work not continuing because it would have to be restarted when the new funding is available. So I think there's quite a significant risk there, and waiting till the end of the inquiry to come to conclusions about that. Those budgetary decisions have already been made.
Is actually, sorry, just to clarify as well, so the enterprise support is actually managed by the Greater Birmingham and Solihull LEP. So they're the managing authority for that European funding, whereas the Youth Employment Initiative is Birmingham City Council. So when European funding was decided, that some of the money went through to the LEPs, some of the money came through to local authorities, but the Department of Work and Pensions was also sort of holding a lot of the European funding sources. So it's very difficult at the minute to work out who you need to speak to and how you kind of transition through into new rounds of funding. So our enterprise support is actually funded until March next year. So that's even shorter of the time frame. But we're not the only organisation that's providing that support. And then the Youth Employment Initiative that Kate will look after will be October next year. So the business pillar is the key pillar for us in terms of ensuring that we can implement the enterprise support. So whenever that can come online, the sooner that can come online, the better. And then there will be a gap, obviously, to the people and skills round that Kate will be looking at.
I mean, in terms of getting an update from Kate, we can look at January's meeting and if we can
What I also to do is to learn, of course, we look at things directly to enhance the responsibilities as they that's up to some
Absolutely, yeah. And if there's maybe a written update beforehand, and then we can, so that the chair can decide actually how to bring that to the committee. But I think understanding what the position is very important, because some of those budgetary decisions will be being made now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, work programme, next item on the agenda. Fiona, would you like to take us through our future meetings?
The focus of the work for this inquiry at the moment, this committee inquiry is the inquiry. So as you've outlined, there's the Birmingham Enterprise Education Partnership at the moment. Children's Trust Committee for the next committee meeting. We can see if there's any potential for Chamber of Commerce if it's available. But we can see what happens with the discussion around funding and whether we can bring something else to that meeting. And then it has to be finished group meeting. I know Seema is in touch with the youth service to see if we can actually get a meeting with some young people and understand the role of the youth service as well, which I think will fit with some of a lot of the questions that are coming up. So we're working through the list of organisations that were set out in terms of reference to try and slot them into the different meetings that we've got. Unfortunately, we couldn't get anybody for the 16th of December, which was the next task and finish group meeting, which is, I think that's been taken out from people's calendars. I think it's getting a bit close to Christmas, but what I might suggest is maybe the chair and the deputy chair of the committee, that might be a chance for us to get online and I can just update you as to where we're at with the project plan for the new year. That would be helpful.
Is it useful to just know what the role of the education partnership is? Is that helpful? Yeah, because it has an impact. Some of the questions you're asking. We have responsibility for children and young people in my service area post 16. We don't do careers advice in schools. So some of the questions about entrepreneurship all sit with Birmingham Education Partnership, which is an arm's length, which Tim is the chief exec, and I'm sure he can and explain what they do. They get funding for careers advice pre-16. We get funding for careers advice post-16. Although we're working with the combined authority to look at doing that slightly differently because of the issues we all agree with in this room. We've got to get into the situation.
So,
But that's why it's shaped that way, and that's why sometimes it's quite legitimate questions actually there's the education partnership to answer.
brilliant. They're down for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sounds
Just,
good.
it's just that sense of structure, actually, that I think it's really, really helpful to people because we feel real frustration because we would like to be in schools as well. But that's not for us.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And I think one of the things that we are keen is to speak to young people who do, try and arrange a visit, because I think a lot of the times I think with young people the decisions are made for them, and I think I'm really keen that we include them and hear their voice as well when we can in decision making. So yeah. Great, so we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our next meeting. It's just to note that our next meeting is on the 11th of January, and this time it will be in committee room 2. And the next item now on the agenda is a call-ins, request for call-ins, actions or petitions, and we don't have any. Next item is any urgent business. No. Finally, authority to chairman and officers to act. Do I have the authority to act in between meetings?
No. Yes, question.
Thank you. And can I just finish off? Can I wish everyone the best, all the best for the festive period? Enjoy yourselves. Have a good time, and we'll close the meeting there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.